I'm Diane, 69. Last night, my daughter-in-law set a mug of cocoa in front of me and said, "This year we're keeping the holidays smaller, no extras." I stirred the cup once, twice. "Extras?" I repeated. She nodded without looking up from her phone. "Less chaos, just us and the kids." My son kept quiet. My granddaughter, Sophie, traced a mark on the table. Nobody looked at me. I smiled the way you do at exact change, polite, mechanical. Then we talked about traffic, the weather, nothing that keeps anyone warm. When they left, the house made its usual winter sounds, the heater coughing, the pipes knocking. I rinsed the mugs. A cocoa ring the size of a wedding band stayed on the table. I opened the closet and pulled down the green folder marked taxes. The elastic had snapped years ago. Inside were papers I'd carried for decades, receipts, bills, donations. I set it on the table beside my laptop. Bank, statements, 10 years. I pressed print. Pages slid out in slow rhythm, stacking into a pale drift. Help, $50. Books, $75. Fees, $120. Transfer small enough to ignore, steady enough to hurt. I took a yellow pad, drew 3 columns: date, reason, amount. At the top, I wrote 2 words I had never written before. For me. I thought about all the winters I came early to peel potatoes, stayed late to wash dishes. The year the lights failed and I drove to 3 stores so the tree would glow by morning. Envelopes under doors, casseroles left with notes, bills covered before anyone asked. I had been proud to be dependable. Now it looked different on paper. Dependable is 1 letter away from expendable. I flipped another page. More transfers, more silence disguised as gratitude. The columns stretched down the paper longer than I expected. Each line felt like a small cut. Each note labeled help now looked like a reminder that I had never asked for help myself. I sharpened a pencil and wrote a new line under the date of tonight's dinner. Amount, 0. Reason, decision. It looked odd against the neat columns, but it was the first time I had written myself into the record. The printer hummed again. I let it keep running. I wanted the stack high enough to see the years I had carried without being carried back. It was easier to ignore 1 page at a time, harder when the pile leaned like a monument. I pressed my palm against the warm paper, cold truth beneath. I wrote one last note at the bottom of the pad. Start counting, not for them, for me. I sat back listening to the clock. Each tick felt like a verdict. I remembered birthdays when I bought the cake, holidays when I filled stockings before dawn. No one asked, no one needed to. I trained them to expect my yes. Now I was training myself to write no. I drew another box on the pad and labeled it tomorrow. Under it, I listed, call the bank, print receipts, save emails. 3 steps, simple enough. But they felt heavier than any casserole dish I'd ever carried. The folder stayed open on the table, pages fanned like wings. I left it there overnight, proof waiting in plain sight. When the heater clicked off, the silence thickened. I poured the last of the cocoa down the sink and turned off the light. The house was dark, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had switched something on. The next afternoon, I walked to my son's house with another tin of shortbread. Sophie opened the door, hair pulled back, sleeves covering her hands. "Grandma," she said, "you didn't text." "I had a question," I told her, "about that college fundraiser app you showed me." She shifted, eyes down. "It's fine, still going. Mom helps with it, don't worry." "How much have you raised?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "Enough. It's complicated." Before she could add more, her mother stepped from the kitchen, drying her hands. "Diane, what are you doing quizzing her?" "I just asked about the app," I said. She gave me that calm smile meant to close doors. The money goes where it should. Details only confuse things. I nodded slowly. Confuse. Details are the only thing that don't. Sophie looked between us. My son lingered at the hallway corner, silent. I set the shortbread down and left. The lock clicked behind me, neat as a period. Back home, I switched the printer on again. Statements, highlighted rows, help. $50 books, $75 fees, $120. Each line was a notch in the column. I clipped them into the binder under a new tab labeled APP. The folder thickened. I searched my email for the first link Sophie sent. Bright emojis. A promise. All proceeds benefit learning costs. No bursar name, no school seal, only a button, donate. I screenshotted every page, printing them one by one. The ink smelled sharp. The paper warmed my hand. I slid the screenshots into clear sleeves. 3 piles now, statements, screenshots, emails. I added a note at the front. Compare totals, see if funds match promises. That night, I called the bursar office myself. A tired woman answered. I asked if they had any fundraiser registered for students. She paused, then said, "No, ma'am. We'd never do that without direct authorization." She sounded sure, like she'd answered this before. I thanked her, hung up, and wrote her words on a sticky note. No fundraiser registered. I placed it on top of the pile. My kitchen table looked like evidence, and maybe that was the right word. Not anger, not suspicion. Evidence. I sharpened another pencil and wrote on the pad, "Tomorrow, listen more closely. They'll tell me everything if I let them talk." The next morning, I saw Sophie at the cafe near the library. She was with friends, laughing too loudly, waving a phone. When she spotted me, her smile shrank. She tucked the phone away. I knew which app it was. I bought a tea, sat near the window, and pretended to read while I wrote notes on a napkin. Times I donated, promises made, questions never answered. Back home, I dug out an old spiral notebook. On the first page, I drew 3 boxes: statements, screenshots, calls. I slipped the printed papers into each section. The notebook bent under the weight. By evening, I had built the skeleton of a case. I thought of my daughter-in-law's words. Details confuse people. I wrote them in the margin and underlined twice. To me, details were the only thing that cleared the fog. I lay awake that night, binder open beside the lamp. Pages fanned like a deck of cards. I counted the transfers one by one until the numbers blurred. When I stopped, the total sat heavy in the margin, $3,740. All of it under the app. All of it disguised as love for my granddaughter. I closed the binder and whispered aloud, "Love doesn't need a portal. Love doesn't need a password." Later that week, I stopped by again, unannounced. The porch light was off. Voices carried through the kitchen window. My son's voice first, hesitant, then hers, sharp, certain. "She doesn't even check. Those transfers keep the app alive. She'll never notice." My son muttered, "It feels wrong. She's helped us enough." Her reply came fast. "It's pocket change to her, and Evan needs the traffic. Do you want to explain to him why it fails?" Silence. Then my son again lower. "Fine, but if she finds out, she won't." I stood frozen, breath fogging on the glass. The words sank like stones. I left before they saw me. The drive home felt longer than it was. At my table, I reopened the binder. Each highlighted row stared back. Help, $50. Books, $75. Fees, $120. I remembered Evan, her brother, years earlier, jobless, shaky after rehab. I'd paid his rent, filled his fridge, bought his bus pass. He'd cried, called me family, and now his name hid inside the code of that fake fundraiser. I logged back into the donor portal, screenshotted redirects, blank about pages, invoices stamped with a careless tag, Evan R. Code, proof hiding in plain sight. I printed the emails too. One glitched open to show raw text. His signature, accidental. I slipped the page into a sleeve, wrote fraud in red across the top. The binder was no longer just paper, it was testimony. At the grocery the next morning, I overheard 2 women laughing by their cars. "Saw the screenshots," one said. "They call her Grandma's piggy bank." The phrase hit harder than any slap. I turned my card away, but the words echoed down every aisle. Grandma's piggy bank. Not mother, not grandmother. Just a spigot they kept turned on. That night, I pulled down the Christmas box from the closet. Scarves folded for Sophie. Coffee mugs etched with names, still wrapped. I set them on the floor, touched each one, and whispered the words no one had given me in years. "Thank you." My own voice sounded foreign. I understood then that betrayal isn't always a knife. Sometimes it's silence when you need defense. Sometimes it's laughter in a parking lot. Sometimes it's an app built on your blind trust. I closed the box and pushed it back onto the shelf. Then I wrote one line in my notebook. This story ends differently. Morning came. I made coffee, let it go cold. I thought of every time I'd carried them. The co-signed car loan, the laptop charged to my card, the ER bill wired before they'd parked. None of it asked politely. All of it expected. Dependable, they'd called me. Exploitable was the truer word. I opened the fraud portal on my bank's site. My finger hovered over submit. Not yet. I needed outside confirmation. People dismiss feelings. They cannot dismiss a ledger. I called an old colleague from the library, now teaching part-time at the community college. Would the school ever run a fundraiser app like this? I asked. She didn't hesitate. No, everything must go through the bursar. Her voice carried the same steel I remembered from budget meetings. Send me what you've got. I scanned the screenshots and emailed them. Minutes later, she replied, 3 words only. This is fraud. I printed that email twice. 1 copy for the binder, 1 for my purse. Evidence now had ribs, a spine, strong enough to stand on its own. 2 nights later, I sat alone in the living room. The binder lay open, its pages like exposed nerves. I stared at the column totals, at the sticky note that read, "This is fraud." None of it felt like victory. It felt like standing in an empty stadium after the game is ended, proof of effort, no audience left. My phone stayed silent. No call from my son, no message from Sophie, not even a thank you for the shortbread. I wondered if they laughed again over dinner, using that phrase, Grandma's piggy bank. I pressed my hands against my knees until the skin whitened. The house creaked in its winter way. The heater clanked, then fell quiet. I could hear my own breath. I thought about the Christmas box upstairs, gifts wrapped, ribbons tied, waiting for a tree I might not see. Tradition had become a private ritual, buying, wrapping, giving, never receiving. A holiday staged for an audience that no longer clapped. I brewed tea, set the kettle down too hard, and cracked the handle. A hairline fracture barely visible. Still, I stared at it thinking, that's me. Functional, but one more shock could split me in two. I carried the cup to the table, sat across from the binder. Evidence is strong, but it is also cold. It doesn't hug you back. It doesn't call you mom. I wanted Sophie to walk in and tell me she hadn't known, that she was sorry. Instead, I imagined her voice joining the laughter in the parking lot. Near midnight, I opened the fraud portal again. My finger hovered over submit. If I pressed it, the bank would freeze accounts. The app would collapse. Evan would be exposed. My son's family would unravel in the fallout. I couldn't decide which part hurt most, that they stole or that pressing submit meant I was the one ending what little was left. I shut the laptop without sending. My hands shook as I turned off the lamp. In the dark, the binder glowed faintly in my mind. A ledger heavy enough to tip the balance of love itself. I whispered aloud into the quiet. How did I become the background? How did I teach them I was endless? My own questions echoed back. No answers came. That night, for the first time in years, I left the Christmas box closed. No lights, no carols, no lists, just silence. My lowest point wasn't the fraud itself. It was realizing they didn't think of me as family at all, only as funding. The next day, I walked to the park out of habit. Families carried bags of gifts, children running ahead, their voices sharp in the cold air. I sat on a bench, binder heavy in my tote. I didn't open it. I just held it, as if weight alone could remind me I was still anchored. A neighbor passed and waved. I forced a smile. She didn't stop to ask how I was. Few people do at this age. You become part of the scenery, a tree that sheds its leaves, dependable but overlooked. When I got home, the answering machine blinked. One new message. I pressed play. It was a telemarketer. I laughed, short and bitter, then turned it off. Even strangers asked more of me than my own family did. By evening, the house felt smaller. The clock ticked louder. I left the binder on the table, unopened, and went to bed early. Sleep didn't come. I stared at the ceiling, repeating the same thought. If they can erase me this easily, what was all those years for? I slept badly and woke with a plan. Fear is loud at night. Morning thinks in lists. I made tea and wrote the steps down. Step 1, get outside confirmation. Step 2, freeze the transfers quietly. Step 3, gather sworn statements. I called the community legal clinic first. A young woman answered, clear, practical. I told her the app name, read off the developer tag. She didn't gasp. She said, "We run a cyber fraud workshop Fridays. Bring your binder." On Friday, I sat at a folding table under fluorescent lights. A lawyer named Maria listened without pity. She flipped through my pages, then nodded. "You have transaction IDs. You have redirect URLs. That's enough to start." She explained how Stripe payouts work, how a masked dashboard still leaves a trail to a bank account, how to request a ledger. She gave me a form to request payout reports and a sample subpoena template. I learned new names for old hurts: chargeback, payout window, commit history. Maria said we'd need a developer to confirm the tag and a school official to deny any authorized fundraiser. She said, "Numbers don't lie. People do." Next, I called the bank. I asked to speak to fraud. A young man named Daniel walked me through freezing recurring transfers and setting a temporary hold. He did it without drama. "We'll flag the account," he said. "We'll reach out to Stripe." I kept my voice level. Inside, my hands were steady for the first time in days. Then I went to the community college. I showed the bursar the screenshot and the email from my colleague. She printed a short letter on official letterhead: "No fundraiser registered." I thanked her and folded the paper into my pocket like a small weapon. The next piece was the developer. I found Evan's small auto shop on a faded sign. He worked under a hood, grease on his knuckles. I waited until the end of the day and walked in with the binder. His face changed when he saw the tag flagged in red. "Evan," I said quietly, "who set the payout?" He squinted at the pages, then at me. He fumbled an excuse about testing. His hands shook. I didn't shout. I slid a printed page across the bench and watched him read his own tag. He swallowed. "I didn't mean—" Maria had warned me subpoenas take time. I didn't want time. I wanted action. So I offered him a choice: come to the clinic, tell the truth, and sign a statement. Or we start with the bank and the lawyer. His face went white. He signed. That evening, I held the signed statement like a small light. It didn't erase the hurt, but it turned suspicion into proof. I had the bursar letter, the Stripe redirect screenshots, the transaction IDs, and now Evan's confession. The plan felt less like a prayer and more like a machine. I wrote the next list on the pad: file fraud report, submit subpoenas, set up a meeting with a reporter, freeze transfers, prepare for the confrontation. The words looked practical on paper. I slept that night with the binder under my arm and a steady line through each task completed. For the first time in weeks, I dreamed of a morning where the truth was loud enough to wake them. Monday morning, I acted. No more drafts, no more hovering fingers. I filed the fraud report with the bank, scanned the binder pages, and attached them one by one: transaction IDs, screenshots, Evan's signed statement, the bursar's letter. The upload bar crawled across the screen, steady as breath. When it finished, I clicked submit. I called Maria at the clinic. She answered on the second ring. "It's filed," I said. She exhaled through the line, then, "Good, now we prepare for the fallout." By afternoon, the bank had frozen the outgoing transfers. An email confirmed, "All recurring donations canceled pending fraud review." I read it twice. The faucet had been turned off. That evening, I sent one more message, not to the family, but to a local reporter who covered consumer scams. I wrote, "I'm a grandmother defrauded by a fake college app. I have documents. Would you like to see them?" She replied within the hour, "Yes, tomorrow at 10. The next morning, I dressed in my navy sweater, the one that doesn't wrinkle. I placed the binder in a canvas tote, checked the zipper twice. At the cafe downtown, I slid the binder across to her. She wore glasses, no nonsense. She turned the pages slowly, eyes narrowing. "You kept everything," she said. "Good, this is airtight." She asked for permission to quote me. I said yes. She asked if I wanted my name used. I said yes again. I was done hiding. After she left, I sat with my tea cooling. The cafe hummed with small talk, cups clinking. No one knew that at a corner table, a grandmother had just set fire to a lie with paper and ink. I felt lighter than I had in months. That afternoon, I received a call from Daniel at the bank. "Ma'am, we traced the payouts. They lead to an account in Evan's name." His tone was careful. "Would you like us to pursue restitution?" "Yes," I said. "Every cent." I hung up and stared at the phone. Restitution, a word I'd never used in my own defense. Always give, never reclaim. Now it was mine. Before bed, I rehearsed the words. Not dramatic speeches, just plain sentences. I know where the money went. The bank froze the account. Evan confessed. I spoke them aloud in the kitchen, voice steady, each phrase like stacking bricks. I imagined my son's face, the shock, the excuses ready in his throat. I imagined Sophie's eyes wide, searching for an exit, and my daughter-in-law, arms crossed, already framing the story to make me the villain. I practiced until the words no longer shook. I slipped the binder back into the tote and placed it by the door. For years, my bag carried casseroles, gifts, emergency cash. This time it carried something heavier: truth. I touched the canvas handle and felt it solid under my palm. Tomorrow I would walk into their house not as the provider, not as the piggy bank, but as the woman who counted every cent and finally said enough. Tuesday evening, I knocked on their door. Sophie opened it, her smile nervous. Behind her, the house smelled of garlic and bread. My son sat at the table. My daughter-in-law leaned against the counter, arms folded. I set the tote on the floor and kept my coat on. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was calm, steady. Sophie stepped back. My son rubbed his forehead. His wife didn't move. I pulled the binder out and set it on the table. I flipped to the first tab: bank statements. Help, $50 books, $75 fees, $120. Do these look familiar? I asked. My son glanced at the pages, then away. His wife spoke instead. "Mom, you don't understand online fundraising. Small donations pile up. It's how the internet works." I turned the page, screenshots of the app, bright emojis, a button marked Donate. "Show me where the college is named. Show me the bursar's seal." Silence. Sophie's eyes dropped to the floor. I turned the page again. Emails, raw code exposed by accident, a tag printed in bold red: Evan R. Fundraiser. "Do you recognize that name?" I asked. My daughter-in-law's mouth tightened. Then I laid down the bursar's letter on official paper. No fundraiser registered. Finally, Evan's signed statement. I slid it across the table like the last card in a game. My son read the line aloud without meaning to. I created the fundraiser app. I directed payouts to my account. His voice broke on the last word. My daughter-in-law slammed her hand on the counter. "This isn't fair. You're twisting everything." I leaned forward. "Numbers don't twist. People do." Sophie whispered, "Mom?" Her voice cracked. My son buried his face in his hands. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply stacked the pages, slow and deliberate, the sound of paper heavy in the quiet. Every cent is accounted for. The bank froze the account. The lawyer has copies. The reporter does too. This story isn't private anymore. My son looked up, panic in his eyes. "Reporter?" "Yes, tomorrow morning, unless I choose otherwise." I let the words hang. My daughter-in-law's confidence slipped. Her arms uncrossed. She looked at Sophie, then at me. "We can fix this. Just drop it." "Drop it?" I repeated. "After years of being called dependable, after being turned into a piggy bank, after you laughed about it in parking lots? No, I don't drop truth." Sophie's shoulders shook. She whispered, "Grandma, I didn't know." Her voice was thin but true. I nodded once, steady. "Now you do." The room shifted then. My son silent, my daughter-in-law cornered, Sophie staring at me with wide eyes. The balance had turned. For the first time in years, I wasn't the background heat. I was the fire in the center of the room. My daughter-in-law's voice rose, sharp now. "You'd ruin your own family over some paperwork?" I answered evenly, "I didn't ruin anything. You did when you turned family into finance." My son stood then, torn between us. "Mom, please, this could destroy everything." "Everything?" I asked, "or just the illusion that I was endless?" He had no reply. I pulled one more sheet from the binder, a printed email chain, timestamps clear. "This is your account, Evan's payouts. You watched the deposits roll in while telling me Sophie needed help with books." I pushed it across the table. My daughter-in-law's hand trembled as she shoved it back. "We needed stability. You wouldn't understand." I understand perfectly, I said. I kept this family stable for decades. Mortgage payments, hospital bills, loans forgiven, and you thought silence meant ignorance. Sophie finally spoke louder, tears sliding down. Is it true? Mom, did you really use Grandma's money for Evan? Her question hung heavier than my evidence. Her mother didn't answer. I looked at my granddaughter. This is why I gathered proof, so you would never again confuse love with theft. Sophie reached toward the binder but pulled her hand back as if touching it might burn. The front door rattled. Evan himself walked in, smelling of oil and cold air. He froze when he saw the binder open. My son whispered, "She knows." Evan's eyes darted to the pages, then to me. I held his signed statement up. Your words, Evan, not mine. He tried to protest, then sank into a chair. His shoulders collapsed. The room was silent but for the ticking clock. I said softly, "This story is already out of your hands. The bank, the lawyer, the reporter, they all know. The only choice left is whether you admit it here to family." Evan buried his face in his palms. My daughter-in-law turned away. Sophie stared at me like seeing me new. My son whispered, "What do we do now?" I closed the binder, firm. You stop lying, that's where we start. The next morning I didn't wait for apologies. I walked into the newsroom cafe with the binder under my arm. The reporter greeted me at a corner table. She'd already drafted the headline, "Grandmother Uncovers Family Fraud." I read it once, then nodded. "Print it," I said. By noon the article was live, names redacted, facts intact. The app was exposed as fraudulent, payouts traced, bank action confirmed. My phone rang all afternoon. Neighbors, old colleagues, even strangers. Some said, "I'm sorry this happened." Others said, "Thank you for speaking up." I didn't need either. What mattered was the truth standing outside my living room, finally visible. That evening my son arrived alone. He looked smaller, shoulders bent. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said. I listened. I didn't offer comfort. "You knew enough," I answered. He nodded, eyes wet. He left without asking for forgiveness. Sophie came the next day with a card she had written in shaky pen. "Grandma, I love you. I didn't know. I'm proud of you." I hugged her long and firm. "You have nothing to apologize for," I said. Her tears soaked my sweater. That was enough. My daughter-in-law never came. Evan sent one short text, "I'll pay it back." I didn't reply. The bank and the lawyer would handle him. My ledger was closed. I packed away the Christmas box, not out of anger, but because I no longer measured love by wrapped gifts. I kept only Sophie's card on the mantel, beside the binder that had become my shield. In January, I took a part-time position at the library again, helping seniors navigate online scams. I told them, "Keep receipts, numbers don't lie." They nodded, some with tears in their eyes. I wasn't just a background figure anymore. I was a voice. On a quiet evening, I lit a candle by the window, brewed peppermint tea, and wrote one last line in my notebook. I am not endless. I am enough. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Women 65 Plus USA, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.